If there was one thing Thandi Mokoena believed in, it was building. Raised by her widowed mother in Pietermaritzburg, where the scent of roasted meat and pap filled the air from their humble Shisa Nyama stall, Thandi had learned early on that survival was earned, not inherited. Her mother, a stern yet warm-hearted woman, raised her daughters with discipline and faith. A woman must know her worth, she'd say, while stirring chakalaka. Thandi took those words with her to Cape Town, where she earned a degree in supply chain management and began carving her path among the city's elite. Then came Kabelo Malungu, the man who would change everything. He was charming, well-spoken, and had the kind of ambitious fire that reminded her of her late father. He ran a small tech repair stall in Long Street, hustling cracked iPhones and importing refurbished laptops. Thandi fell hard. He wasn't wealthy, but he had vision, and that was gold to her. They married within a year, in a glamorous vineyard ceremony in Constantia. It was intimate but rich in elegance. Floral arches, satin table settings, and guests from both Josie and KZN. To the world, it looked like a fairy tale. But what the cameras didn't capture was Mamrina's stiff smile, or the subtle glares from Kabelo's sisters, Benolo and Refilwe, as they whispered among themselves in clipped Swana. Thandi thought she could win them over. She didn't know then that the business, the love, and the family she was pouring herself into would one day try to bury her alive. Thandi never believed in sitting pretty. From the moment Malungu Tech was registered, she was the one working behind the curtains, drafting supplier contracts, handling import logistics, attending every training and trade expo in Cape Town and Joburg. Kabelo, with his charm and smooth talk, became the face of the brand, while she remained the mind behind it. The business grew fast. Within 18 months, they moved out of Long Street into a sleek new showroom in Sandton, Johannesburg, with floor-to-ceiling glass walls and minimalist decor. Customers were greeted by jazz music and cappuccinos, not fluorescent lighting and dusty gadgets. It was the kind of business that made the press take notice, and they did. Kabelo was named one of Tech Africa's top 10 young black founders, but in every photo, Thandi stood at the edge of the frame, holding a clipboard or smiling politely behind him. It didn't matter. Not at first. She believed in the dream. In their dream. But behind closed doors, small things began to shift. His sisters, Benolo and Refilwe, who had shown no interest in tech or business, suddenly demanded executive roles. Refilwe started issuing instructions to staff, while Benolo used the showroom's reception desk as her personal glam station. Mamrina began showing up unannounced, strolling through the showroom and borrowing electronics for her church raffles, which Thandi later discovered she was reselling at inflated prices. Kabelo brushed it off. Family must feel included, he would say. Thandi swallowed her discomfort. After all, hadn't her mother taught her that a good wife keeps the peace? But peace was growing expensive, and the cracks beneath their empire were starting to show. It started with a scent, expensive, foreign, and far too familiar. Thandi first noticed it clinging to Kabelo's shirts after his supposed business trips to Johannesburg. She ignored it at first, chalking it up to conference venues or fancy lounges. But when the scent started lingering in their bedroom, and even the passenger seat of his car, her heart grew restless. Then came Lerato Van Wyk. Introduced as a business consultant, she arrived at Malungu Tech with a bang, platinum blonde braids, oversized sunglasses, and a rotating wardrobe of imported European fashion. She claimed to have worked with tech startups in Sandton and the Netherlands. Kabelo praised her like a prophetess sent from Silicon Valley. She understands global branding, he told Thandi over dinner, barely looking up from his phone. You should watch how she moves. It was the first time Thandi felt like an outsider in her own home. Lerato's presence became frequent. She hosted strategy sessions, critiqued the showroom layout, and even changed the company's Instagram bio without consulting Thandi. Staff began whispering. One even confided, "Madam, the way she talks to Kabelo, it's not just business." Still, Thandi said nothing. She cooked. She managed invoices. She smiled at clients and nodded at Kabelo's dismissiveness. But at night, she cried into her silk pillowcase, the scent of Lerato's perfume haunting her dreams. It wasn't just the business they were taking. It was her husband, her pride, her purpose. And soon, she would discover it was also her life. At first, it felt like stress. Thandi had always carried weight quietly, family burdens, business deadlines, Cabello's growing distance. But this was different. Sharp stomach cramps that came without warning. A pounding in her head like thunder rolling behind her eyes. She began losing weight, her hair thinned, and her skin, normally glowing from home-blended rooibos oils, grew dull and patchy. She went to the doctor. Blood tests. Stool samples. 4 drips. Nothing made sense. It could be chronic fatigue syndrome, one GP said. Maybe stress-induced gastritis, another offered. But Thandi knew her body. This was deeper. This was darker. The answer came on a cold morning when Zanil, the intern from Kailicha, approached her in tears. "Miss Thandi, please forgive me. I saw Ma'am Rena in the kitchen last week. She poured something into your tea. A white powder. I thought it was muthi, but then I saw your eyes. You're sick, madam." Thandi's knees buckled. Her own mother-in-law. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She simply nodded, placed a trembling hand on Zanil's shoulder, and whispered, "Thank you." That night, she lay on the couch wrapped in a wool blanket. Cabello walked in with Lorado, who laughed at something he whispered. They didn't notice Thandi's eyes open beneath the blanket. They didn't see her hand curl into a fist as Lorado strutted into her kitchen. "That Mumu wife's almost out the picture," Lorado giggled. "Soon, this whole empire will be ours." Thandi didn't cry. She stared at the chandelier and made a vow. "They want to poison me, but I'll poison their plans instead." And thus, the game began. Thandi had always believed in strategy. Her mother once told her, "When you're surrounded by snakes, don't stomp. Step lightly. Let them think you're harmless." And that's exactly what she did. She started preparing her own meals, ginger tea in her favorite Kosa pattern mug, pap cooked before dawn, fruits washed in filtered water. No one noticed that she'd stopped touching anything cooked in the house by other hands. She moved slower, spoke softer. She began wearing oversized sunglasses, not for fashion, but to hide the fierce alertness in her eyes. Even her staff believed she was fading, whispering, "Madam is really not well." But behind her silence, Thandi was gathering power. She made copies of all Malangateka's legal documents, supplier contracts, board resolutions, and import licenses. She backed up customer databases and archived financial statements onto encrypted USB drives. Then she emailed everything to herself under an alias, zulalegacy81@securemail.co.za. She contacted advocate Naledi Kumalo, using a recommendation from her cousin Lebo. Naledi was sleek, discreet, and deadly in court. They met in a private boardroom in Santon. Thandi arrived wearing a scarf, glasses, and a beige trench coat. "I'm ready," she said. "But they must never see it coming." Naledi smiled. "Then let's move in silence." At home, Cabello was too distracted. He was busy flying between Cape Town and Windhoek, planning his expansion with Lorado. Ma'am Rena still hovered around the villa, passing Thandi with pitiless stares and fake smiles. Bonolo and Refill, we now called her ghost wife, behind her back. Perfect. Let them underestimate her. Because when a queen plays dead, it's only to return with her crown shining brighter than ever. The silence had served its purpose. It gave them false confidence. Now it was time to strike. One Monday morning, the Malanga Tech business account was frozen. Cabello first noticed when his platinum business card was declined at an upscale sushi restaurant in Santon. He laughed it off, glitch, perhaps. But when it happened again, while checking into a boutique hotel with Lorado, the panic began. Then came the real bombshell, an urgent notice from the Companies and Intellectual Property Commission, CIPC. A board-level dispute had been filed, citing evidence of fraud, medical endangerment, and asset misuse. Thandi had triggered a clause buried deep in their founding documents, the primary investor override, which granted full control to the majority financial contributor during a conflict. Cabello, too focused on image and travel, had never bothered to read it. But Thandi had.
Twice.
At home, she walked into the Constantia villa like nothing had happened. She greeted Mamrina with a kiss on the cheek and dropped grocery bags on the counter. "You're looking stronger," Mamrina said cautiously. "God is good," Thandi replied with a smile, her eyes unblinking. That night, Cabello returned home sweating. He kissed her forehead and rambled about stress, pressure, and the need to reconnect. He suggested a weekend getaway. Thandi smiled. "That would be lovely," she said, gently touching his hand. But that evening, while he slept, she packed her documents, the USB drive, and her wedding ring. She placed the ring on the dining table, like a tombstone on a grave, and walked out the front door without a sound. By morning, chaos had begun. Lorado's phone calls went unanswered. Mamrina couldn't withdraw since staff were asking questions. Lawyers were being called. But Thandi was gone, and the empire they tried to steal was now in her grip. The Cape Town High Court hadn't seen such a crowd in years. Business reporters, feminist bloggers, and social media influencers lined the courtroom steps. The case had gone viral. The billion-rand betrayal. Wife battles husband over poison, power, and property. Cabello arrived looking worn. The tailored suits were gone, replaced with an ill-fitted blazer and restless hands. By his side was a young lawyer with too much cologne and not enough sense. Lorado was absent, rumored to have fled to Botswana after her scam consultancy was exposed. Thandi arrived with quiet thunder. She stepped out of a sleek black Mercedes wearing a snow-white Maxosa suit with gold accents. Her makeup was flawless, her afro wrapped in a deep green turban. At her side was advocate Naledi Kumalo, and flanking them were women from the Built Not Borrowed movement she had quietly started, entrepreneurs, survivors, warriors. The courtroom fell silent as she entered. Even the judge, Justice Fumzile Modi, a silver-haired icon of legal reform, raised an eyebrow. "Let's begin," the judge said, her voice sharp and dry. Cabello's team opened with claims of unfair removal, emotional manipulation, and marital sabotage. But Naledi was unshaken. She presented contracts showing Thandi's majority stake, emails proving intent to rewrite company ownership, voice notes of Cabello and Mamrina discussing Thandi's poisoning and Lorado's false pregnancy, a letter from a doctor confirming deliberate health sabotage. The final moment came when Zanil took the stand, hands trembling, but voice strong. "I saw Mamrina put the powder in her tea. I'm sorry I waited so long." The room held its breath. Justice Modi shook her head slowly. What kind of man conspires to poison the woman who built his fortune? The gavel slammed. Thandi won everything: full ownership, damages for emotional abuse, and public exoneration. Cabello stood speechless. His empire lost. His lies exposed.
And Thandi?
She stood tall, bowed gently to the judge, and walked out to applause not just from the crowd, but from history itself. Freedom came with silence. No apologies. No explanations. Just power reclaimed. Within a week of the court victory, Malanga Tech was officially rebranded to Amathandi Global, a blend of her name and Ama, meaning power in Zulu. The logo was redesigned by a young woman from Soweto. The new headquarters opened in Melrose Arch, and every board member wore a pin with the words, "Built, Not Borrowed." Thandi turned her pain into a platform. She launched mentorship programs for women entrepreneurs, especially those who had been financially exploited or pushed out of businesses they helped build. The flagship initiative, #OwnYourLegacy, was backed by major South African brands, NGOs, and even an investment from a Namibian tech fund led by Black women. She spoke at TEDx Cape Town, appeared on the cover of Forbes Africa, and was featured in a BBC Africa documentary titled "The Queen Who Refused to Fold." Social media lit up with hashtags. #Thandi the Builder. #Poison did not win. #Legacy over lies. Meanwhile, Cabello became a ghost. His credit dried up. His name was blacklisted across the tech industry. Attempts to rebuild were quietly blocked by suppliers loyal to Thandi, by partners who admired her, and by his own guilt. Lorado, now exposed as a serial con artist, resurfaced briefly online, begging for forgiveness. No one cared. As Thandi Global expanded into Lusaka, Windhoek, and Accra, Thandi knew one thing for certain. She wasn't just surviving. She was rewriting the rules. Her story was no longer a cautionary tale. It was a blueprint. The morning mist in Pietermaritzburg was thick, wrapping around the hills like a shawl. The gravel crunched beneath Thandi's heels as she made her way through the cemetery. In her hand was a basket of white lilies and proteas, her mother's favorite. She stopped before the tombstone etched with loving hands. Thandi Mokoena, 1963 to 2013. Mother, warrior, foundation. Thandi knelt slowly, not with sadness, but with reverence. I finally did it, Mama, she whispered. I'm no longer the girl begging to be seen. I'm the woman you raised me to be, wise, strong, and unshakable. She placed the flowers gently and sat for a moment, letting the silence speak. The wind brushed her cheeks. A bird called out in the distance. She thought of the nights she cried alone in silk beds, of the poison that drained her, of Lorado's laughter in her kitchen. She remembered the sting of betrayal, the courtroom gasp, the judge's gavel. But above all, she remembered the moment she walked out, with nothing but her files, her breath, and her will to rise. You once said the world doesn't owe us kindness, she said aloud. But it cannot take away what we build with our own hands. Back in Johannesburg, her mentorship program had just crossed 15,000 members. Her inbox overflowed with stories from women who found the courage to walk away, to reclaim, to build again. Her story had sparked a movement. Her voice had become a torch. Thank you for never letting me settle, she said, standing tall. This legacy, it's yours too. And as she walked back toward the car, the sun broke through the mist. The roots had held. It was late. Thandi sat by the window in her Melrose Arch apartment, a steaming cup of chamomile in her hand. The city shimmered below, lights stretching like stars across the skyline. Her calendar was full, a panel discussion in Nairobi, a mentorship summit in Durban, a podcast feature with women in tech Africa. Her world had grown, yet tonight it was still. She scrolled through emails, partnerships, thank you notes, event invites, until her eyes caught a name she hadn't seen in months. Subject: I owe you this. From Lorado Van Wyk. Her fingers hovered. Curiosity won. She clicked. Thandi, you don't know me personally, and you have every reason to hate me.
But I owe you something.
The truth. I was raised to believe being a side chick to a rich man was the best life. That power meant proximity to money. I never knew I was the pawn. Until you exposed everything. I've lost everything. My name. My circles. But I'm in therapy now. And I just wanted to say thank you. You made me question everything I stood on. And that means you changed me. I hope one day I can build something real like you did.
I'm sorry.
Truly. Lorado. Thandi read it twice. Then once more. She didn't reply.
She didn't need to.
Some victories weren't about revenge. They were about redemption, even for those who never deserved it. She closed her laptop, placed her tea down, and walked onto the balcony. The wind kissed her face gently, and for the first time in years, she felt light. The betrayal hadn't broken her. It had birthed her. And now, standing above a city she once feared, Thandi smiled. Not because she had survived, but because she had risen.